Always fun to engage with all of you here. It's a late night conversation, but we're still here. We're not going anywhere. And hey, I'm here. I've got plenty to talk about with you all tonight. The way we do things here, if you are new, is we do the opening remarks. I write down your super chats as they come in. We do our roll call, where I call you out as I see you, names and locations, to give everyone a sense of the community that we're part of. And then after that, I answer your super chat questions. That's how we do the show. So tonight I've got opening remarks to talk to you all about. And then from there, I'll do the roll call, and then from there, I'll answer your questions. That's the way we do the show. That is our format. So welcome, everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell so you get notified whenever we do this again. And remember, folks, remember that if you give me a super chat, I will give you an answer. It may not be the answer that you want, but I will give you an answer if you give me a super chat. And on that note, folks, be sure to share this on Facebook. Be sure to share this on Twitter, tweet it out, post this on Facebook, post this on Reddit, post this on Bunker Chan. Anywhere that videos are shared, live streams are shared, share this video. Bring people on board. The more people that are here, the more fun we have, the more interactive this gets. We've got mods in the chat, so do your jobs. Mods, don't feed the trolls. Let me repeat, do not feed the trolls. Don't feed the trolls. If some kind of troll comes in the chat, don't feed them. Don't feed them. Just let them go along on their way. Good times, folks. Welcome. Glad to be with you. Happy Friday night. It has been a crazy, crazy week. Donald Trump is banned from Twitter for life. Donald Trump has received a lifetime suspension from Twitter. Donald Trump is not on Twitter. Folks, I do not like Donald Trump, and I've got plenty of negative things to say about Donald Trump tonight. But this is not a good move at all. This sets a very dangerous precedent. A very, very dangerous precedent. They can ban the President of the United States while he's still in office from Twitter. They can ban anybody. All right. Role of workers' councils in a socialist government, democratic centralism. Honor if you could follow up on neoliberalism. All righty. All right, so centralism, councils. All right, liberalism. Like I said, this is a very dangerous precedent. Very dangerous precedent, folks. We got Kamala Harris, a puppet of Silicon Valley, coming into office. I'm pouring unnamed orange beverage, and hear it floating on the rocks there. And, yeah, this is a very dangerous precedent, folks. A very, very dangerous precedent. Very, very dangerous precedent. And I'm worried about the future of this country. I am really worried about what's going to happen in the near future, as well as in the far future. The events that went down on Wednesday were disgusting, and the reaction to them has also been disgusting. We are headed for dangerous times. But those of us who understand how capitalism works, understand the, I should get a LBRY account, all right? Those of us who understand how capitalism works, how the economy works under capitalism, we know what's going on, right? This is what happens when we enter a prolonged capitalist crisis. When the rate of profit is in decline, when there's been a huge leap in technology, North Korea recent events, there's been a huge leap in technology. This is what happens. This is how the capitalist economy works. When there is a crisis in society, when there is a crisis of overproduction, when the ability to produce goods vastly expands and they don't have a place for the worker at the assembly line, when workers are being pushed out of production and replaced with machines, all of this leads to a situation where the capitalists start scrambling with each other for profits and start desperately trying to stabilize society. Every capitalist wants society to be stable. They just want the other capitalists to pay for it. So different factions among the capitalist class fight for power and try to seize control of the government. This is called Bonapartism. The capitalists all want to resolve the crisis, but they all want the other capitalists to be the ones to pay for it. Hamilton versus Jefferson. They all want the other capitalists to be the ones to pay for it. And that is how things tend to work in a capitalist crisis. And working class people get recruited by one section of the capitalist class or another as foot soldiers in the political war that's taking place. And usually, as the Bonapartist factions battle for control of the state, you have a reactionary pole that emerges. Emergency rooms with COVID, psych ward, PTSD, now 5 dead, worst week. I'm really sorry to hear you're having problems with your family, Joseph. That's heartbreaking to hear what's happening. And I think everyone in this community is sending you positive vibes now and understands that, that what you're facing is absolutely horrendous. And so we hold you in the light, Joseph, and we're all thinking of you. I'm sorry you've had to deal with what you're dealing with. And when a capitalist crisis goes on, you have these Bonapartist factions fighting for control of the state. And among those Bonapartist factions, you usually get a particularly reactionary pole, and you get a progressive pole. You get a pole that wants to stabilize the economy by moving forward and advancing, and you get a pole that wants to stabilize the economy with destruction and death and terror. And that's generally what happens, right? And this is the crisis. Okay, so that's the question on Iran and open borders. Open borders. Okie dokie. Folks, Donald Trump has absolutely no shred of respect from me. None. Absolutely none. Now, folks, I did not and never did support Donald Trump. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I have, from day one, said that what Trump says about Muslims and those who practice the Islamic faith is reprehensible. I have, from day one, said that what Donald Trump says about the immigrant community, calling them rapists and murderers, saying we have to build a big giant wall, that is also reprehensible. Folks, from the beginning, Donald Trump saying that wages are too high, Donald Trump calling for deregulation, Donald Trump supporting police and police brutality and saying that the police brutality protesters are not legitimate in the aftermath of Ferguson. I have never been a Trump supporter. Now, Donald Trump and I did talk on one occasion, and it was interesting because Donald Trump accidentally called me his favorite reporter. I'm sure he regrets those words. But yes, the one time Trump and I did talk, I was at a press conference in March of 2016, and Donald Trump was asking people questions. 5-star movement. Donald Trump was answering questions, and he had one last question, and I will never forget that I raised my hand, and I raised my hand, and he said, Donald Trump said, "Who's my favorite reporter?" You. So Donald Trump did call me his favorite reporter. Like I said, I am sure he regrets those words. I'm sure he regrets them. But he's probably regretting quite a few things at the moment. But maybe he's not. I don't know. Anyhow, folks, Donald Trump abandoned his supporters. What Donald Trump did at the Capitol was absolutely reprehensible. Donald Trump, he did exactly the classic rich kid bullying routine. He got people who he deemed to be inferior to him, people who didn't grow up with a father who was a wealthy real estate owner. And he got them all excited and pumped up, and he sent them out there to be made fools of. And on national television, all kinds of people saw Donald Trump. They saw Donald Trump, and they saw his supporters running through the halls of Congress. They saw the guy in the buffalo hat, and they saw people stealing the podium and running around and breaking windows. And they thought, these people are a bunch of insane hillbillies. They thought, these people are dangerously crazy, white trash rednecks. Oh my God, these people are reprehensible. They're scum. Oh my God, what's going on the U.S. Capitol? And that's what Donald Trump meant for them to think. He didn't want his supporters to look good. He didn't want his supporters to accomplish anything. He didn't think his supporters would actually be able to stop what was going on. Well, he didn't think he'd be able to actually stop the certification of the presidential election results. Donald Trump just thought it would be funny. Thought it would be hilarious to send all of his supporters down there to make fools out of themselves. Donald Trump got them all pumped up. Oh, we're not going to be weak. And then he said, I'll meet you at the Capitol. And Donald Trump did not show up at the Capitol. Donald Trump went somewhere, and I can guarantee you, wherever Donald Trump went, he turned on his television. And he sat there and laughed. And he said, look at what these people did for me. Look at that. And he sat there and he thought it was hilarious. And he said, oh boy, they're going to have to clean up the Capitol. I wrecked the place. Look what I can do. Somebody died. Did you know that? There was one woman who was shot in the chest by a police officer. 4 others had injuries or heart attacks or something during the rally. And Donald Trump was shut down from Twitter, shut down from Facebook. And out of the blue, Donald Trump came forward and he said, wow, I never asked them to do that. Oh, that was awful. They violated the sanctity of our hallowed hall. Oh, man. Wow, I can't believe that I'm shocked that such a thing happened. Oh, man. Oh, these people, FBI, go round them up. Go round them up. They got to be prosecuted. Yeah, I never wanted that to happen. I never wanted that to happen. And right now, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is technically part of the executive branch of the government, under Trump's dominion, it's part of the Department of Justice, is going around and arresting these people. The guy who had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's death has already been apprehended. Somebody else was live streaming, apprehended. Over 80 people have been rounded up by the FBI right now. After Trump said, I'll meet you at the Capitol, don't be weak. Donald Trump sat back and laughed, did not meet them. Monday. Didn't meet them at the Capitol. Sat back and then, I never asked them to do, no, I never. Oh my goodness, no, arrest them. Yeah, I never would support people breaking the law. Oh boy, oh no, oh my goodness, I can't believe I saw such a thing. Folks, Donald Trump is a punk. He is an absolute despicable punk. If there was any shred of respect I had for Donald Trump, any shred. Occasionally, I would enjoy hearing him call out the mainstream media. Occasionally, he would speak the truth in ways that we all kind of appreciated. When Bill O'Reilly said, well, Vladimir Putin kills journalists, and he said, oh, do you think this country's real innocent? I appreciated that. There were a couple zingers in the media that I liked. I liked him ripping up the TPP. Any shred of respect I had for Donald Trump immediately vanished after what he did to his supporters. These were the true believers. These were the people who had Trump's back despite it all, right? All the studies showed that he didn't win the election. Biden won. Yeah, there might have been something here or there, but Biden won the election. Oh, these people had his back, right? Trump, these people stuck with him. These were the true believers of the Trump movement. These were the true believers of Donald Trump. These were the people that were going to go down, sink or swim. They were going to go down with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump thought it would be funny to make them look like buffoons on national television and get them injured and killed. And he sat there, didn't show up at the Capitol like he said he would. And then after that, he denounced them. And he's doing nothing while the government's rounding them up and arresting them. Now, can you think of a worse leader? Folks, in the U.S. Navy, if a ship is sinking, who is the last person to get off of the ship that sinks? It's the captain. The captain goes down with the ship. He is the last man off the boat. Donald Trump was supposed to be the captain of the country, or at least the captain of his own movement. But the ship hit an iceberg, and he said, hope you find a lifeboat, guys. I'm out of here. And jumped ship, jumped on his yacht, and rode off into the sunset, and let his supporters drown. YPG. Folks, Donald Trump, his movement was anti-immigrant, which I don't support. Petty bourgeois rednecks. His movement was anti-Islamic. His movement was bigoted. But even if his movement was all these bad things, he was still a bad leader of his own movement, right? There used to be this thing called honor. There used to be this thing called martial virtue. There used to be this thing called heroism. There used to be this thing called sacrifice and honor. Donald Trump has none of that. Donald Trump is a cynical bully who enjoys watching other people get hurt and really has no principles at all. SM language. No principles at all. None. Folks, I want to tell you about another rally that happened a long time ago. Long time ago, there was a rally here in New York City. It was on March 6th, 1931. And it was not a rally for the Trump movement. It was a rally by the Communist Party of America. Communist Party USA had a rally on March 6th, 1931. It was a rally for International Unemployment Day. And at that rally, there were about 20,000 people. 20,000 people gathered in Union Square in New York City, 1931. And the crowd gathered, and they had signs, jobs, fight or starve, and they gathered in Union Square demanding unemployment insurance and jobs for the unemployed. And the leader of that march was someone named William Z. Foster. And the NYPD showed up, and they said, William Z. Foster, you need to tell this crowd to disperse. William Z. Foster came back and said, well, I'm not going to tell them to disperse. In fact, we're going to march. We are going to march to City Hall. The NYPD said to William Z. Foster, they said, we have not granted you a parade permit. William Z. Foster, we have not granted you communists a parade permit to march to City Hall to demand the rights of the unemployed and food for hungry children. We're not going to allow it. So William Z. Foster, he got up in front of that crowd, and he said, you know what? They have opened the street for every king and every foreign leader, every rich noble who comes to this city gets a parade. The unemployed people of this city who are hungry, we're going to march. We will march. And he fired up the crowd, and they marched from City Hall to Union Square, or from Union Square to City Hall, down through Lower Manhattan. And the NYPD came at them with clubs, and they fought back, and they had police on horseback charge into the crowd, and the Young Communist League, which was like teenagers, the Young Pioneers and high school kids, they unfurled a bunch of marbles and knocked over all the police on horseback, and it was a pitched battle that went on for blocks. Now, I don't know if William Z. Foster said to the crowd, I will meet you at City Hall. I don't know if he said it, but it was understood. But William Z. Foster actually showed up at City Hall. When that rally ended, after that crowd had been through a fight, after people got beaten up, after police on horseback were knocked over, after the whole melee and all the chaos that happened in Union Square and all the way down, William Z. Foster showed up at City Hall. Now, he got up at the podium at the closing rally and he gave a speech. And that closing speech at the rally that he gave was interrupted by the New York City Police Department, who put handcuffs on him and dragged him to jail. And William Z. Foster spent months in jail, probably almost a year on Rikers Island for leading that demonstration. William Z. Foster was not a punk. William Z. Foster didn't sell his people out. William Z. Foster was a working class person, and he led a crowd of working class people to fight for their rights, and he went down with the ship. He did more prison time than anybody else. There was another guy, Robert Minor, who did some prison time because of that rally, but William Z. Foster spent a year in jail for the rights of the unemployed. Frankfurt School. All right. Folks, let me tell you about Eugene Debs. Eugene V. Debs was the leader of the Socialist Party of America. And in 1917, the United States joined World War I. And Eugene Debs said that World War I was a boss's war. It was a rich man's war. He didn't want to die for that. He wasn't going to fight for the profits of American oil companies and big bankers and monopolists. So, in Canton, Ohio, they had an anti-war rally, an anti-war gathering in Canton, Ohio. And in Canton, Ohio, Eugene Debs got up in front of a crowd of his supporters and gave an anti-war speech. Now, what happened? The police put him in handcuffs. He went to federal prison under the Espionage Act for sedition, for the crime of giving an anti-war speech. And from jail, Eugene Debs gave anti-war articles that he wrote, and from jail, he ran for president. They actually had campaign buttons. I support prisoner number, and they had his prison number on the button. That is real leadership. Folks, let me tell you about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, the guy the national holiday is named after? Let me tell you about what happened in April of 1968, right? Dr. Martin Luther King was very popular in the early 60s. Wasn't popular in the South, but throughout the United States, he was quite popular for his civil rights work in the early 1960s. Yes, I was going to comment on that. But 1968, Martin Luther King started denouncing the Vietnam War. And he gave a speech at Riverside Church in New York City. And in that speech, he said that the American government was the greatest purveyor of violence on this earth, the American government. And he denounced the war in Vietnam and said that the amount of money that's wasted on this war in Vietnam, it needs to stop. And suddenly, Dr. Martin Luther King's approval rating started to sink. The NAACP denounced Dr. Martin Luther King for opposing the Vietnam War. And Dr. Martin Luther King started talking about how the war on poverty was the solution, and started advocating a guaranteed job. He wrote a book called Where Do We Go From Here?, calling for government employment, for every citizen to be guaranteed a job. And he started leading marches against poverty and against people not having jobs. And then Dr. Martin Luther King found out that in Memphis, Tennessee, the sanitation workers, the people who clean the streets of the city, were on strike for better conditions, and on strike because of the way they were treated and the way they were not respected on the job. And they were marching through the streets of Memphis, Tennessee with signs that said, "I am a man." So Dr. Martin Luther King went to Memphis, Tennessee to support striking sanitation workers. And it was outside of his hotel room that he was struck down by a sniper's bullet. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died on a picket line. He died on a picket line. Striking sanitation workers in Memphis were protesting for their rights. Martin Luther King Jr. came to the city to support them and was shot down. That is a real leader. Okay. Yes, he made the speech in 1967. Always ask a tour guide. RFK as president. Folks, let me tell you about someone named Mao Zedong, who was leader of the Chinese Revolution. In China, the people of China, the communists, were being persecuted. The peasantry of China was very poor and oppressed and were rising up against their landlords. So Mao went into the countryside and started waging a war to fight for the rights of the peasants. Mao became like a mythical Robin Hood figure who was fighting for the rights of the peasants. And they carved out liberated territories. And in 1931, they even had the Chinese Soviet Republic that they declared. In China, they carved out enough liberated territory. You can Google this. They declared the Chinese Soviet Republic. They had their own flag and everything. Credibility. But, Chiang Kai-shek and the reactionaries, they got some help from the Nazis in Germany, from Hans von Seeckt, a Nazi general sent to work with Chiang Kai-shek to put down Mao. And eventually, the Chinese Soviet Republic was surrounded, and they had to retreat. So what did Mao do? Did Mao say, "All right, guys, you're on your own"? Oh, no. Mao went up into the mountains, and he marched on the long march. Thank you, Javier, for your super chat. He marched on the long march, and they were without food, and they were hungry, and they were freezing in the winter. But Mao, he marched through the mountains, got pretty skinny. But Mao didn't abandon the Chinese Communist Party. He marched on that long march through the mountains in the cold, freezing, without enough food. And as they would go from village to village, the Chinese communists had a policy: never steal from the people. Not a spool of thread, not a needle, nothing. You cannot steal from the people. And so many of these rural villages in China, for thousands of years, whenever an army would march in, the people in these villages would just fear. They would cower, because whenever an army came, whether it was from the dynasty, the Qing dynasty, the Ming dynasty, no matter what it was, no matter what army would come in, the army would always kill people and loot and steal stuff. So they would see the Red Army march in with their guns, and they would brace themselves. And then they would see that Mao and the Red Army, not only did they not plunder and steal from every village they came to, but even though they were hungry and skinny because they didn't have food, they would not take an item of food from the villagers without paying for it, without giving something in return. One of the principles of the Red Army was to never accept any gifts from the people. Never accept any gifts from the people. So even if these villagers would see these starving soldiers, Mao and his soldiers were hungry and see them starving, and they would give them a loaf of bread, they would have to give them something in return. They'd pull a button off of their uniform and give it to them in return, because they never took anything from the people without paying for it. That was the policy of the Red Army. And it's because of policies like that. It was because it was the first army these villages had ever seen in thousands of years that didn't plunder and rob from them, because it had so much honor and courage and valor and principles. It's because of that when Mao came down from the mountain, his army was 10 times the size it was when they marched up the mountain, when they retreated. And that's why today China is the second largest economy in the world. Folks, can I tell you who is the exact opposite of Donald Trump when it came to dealing with his supporters and his movement? Qasem Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani would never abandon his soldiers. Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, say what you want about him. Say you don't agree with him about this, you don't agree with him about that, you don't like that he collaborated with the USA in Afghanistan. Say whatever you want, right? You can disagree with what he did, you can disagree with what he said. But Qasem Soleimani was not a punk. Qasem Soleimani did not abandon his own people. Qasem Soleimani was an honorable military figure, known for his sacrifice. He understood that the captain goes down with the ship. He understood that if you have principles, and you're asking people to go out and fight for you, you're asking people to go out and die for you, you have to have courage. You can't be a punk. Qasem Soleimani was murdered by Donald Trump, and he was murdered in a cowardly way. He was shot in the back. Qasem Soleimani was the exact opposite of Donald Trump. Like him or hate him, you don't have to endorse everything he said or did. I certainly don't. But Qasem Soleimani understood valor and martial virtue and courage. He had what Mao had. He had what William Z. Foster had. He had what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had. He had what Eugene Debs and William Z. Foster had. He knew that you don't abandon your followers. If you are asking people to go out and make sacrifices for your movement, you also have to go out and make sacrifices for your movement. That is the kind of person Qasem Soleimani was. Folks, let's talk about Gus Hall. Gus Hall was the leader of the Communist Party USA for many years. You know, Gus Hall, he was a steel worker in Youngstown. He led striking workers to fight against their bosses and fight for better wages among the steel workers in Youngstown, Ohio. He was called a live martyr. Yes, Frank, that's what he was called. And Gus Hall, he was on the national board of the Communist Party, and in 1948, he and 20 other leaders of the Communist Party were charged with the crime of, preaching the overthrow of the U.S. government. And And Gus Hall, like all the other leaders, came forward and said, we have never advocated the overthrow of the U.S. government. Never. Never have we advocated the overthrow of the U.S. government. We have always favored a peaceful transition to socialism. And they were convicted. And they were sent to federal prison. And they were not convicted for anything they ever said themselves. They were convicted of what Lenin said. Lenin wrote a book called The State and Revolution. And the primary piece of evidence against Gus Hall and the other Communist Party leaders in 1948 in the United States was not anything they ever said or anything they ever did. It was a book written by Lenin called The State and Revolution. And there were passages from that book that were taken out of context to make it sound like the Communist Party advocated the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. And based on what Lenin said, Lenin, a man who lived on the other side of the planet, a man who was long dead by the time the trial ever happened, Gus Hall and other communist leaders were sent to prison. And they went to federal prison, and they served their time in federal prison. Extreme right become mainstream. Mainstream. And I heard a story. About Gus Hall that sticks with me. I can't verify it. I was not there. I heard this story from an old communist in Cleveland, a guy who grew up in the Communist Party. He told me this story about 5 times. This is how important it was to him. That after Gus Hall got out of prison, when he was running for president on the communist ticket, he was going around the country, different parts of the country, to give speeches for his presidential campaign. McCarthyism was long over. The country had changed. Communists were not in prison anymore. He was going around to different parts of the country, giving his communist speeches, running a symbolic presidential campaign. Gus Hall never had a chance of winning, never got any mainstream, exposure, but, it was kind of a symbolic presidential campaign. He came to one city somewhere in the country, and at the rally, someone came up to him after the rally was over, after his campaign speech was over. Someone came up to him crying, just sobbing, saying, Gus Hall, I'm so sorry. Gus Hall said, why? What's bothering you, comrade? What's the problem? The guy said, Gus, I was in the party back in 1948 when they were putting you in prison. And Gus, I got scared. And I ripped up my party card. I have a wife and kids. I didn't want to go to prison. I was scared. I ripped up my party card. I burned my Marxist books. I pretended I'd never heard of the Communist Party. I'm sorry, Gus. I'm sorry that I did this. Gus Hall hugged him, put his arms around him. He said, it's okay, comrade. You did what you could do. I did what I could do. Now that is real leadership. That is the opposite of Donald Trump. And that is why Gus Hall was so widely loved by the American working class. I had a super chat a while back there. Settlers' crowd. I think settler colonialism is the primary contradiction. That's Gus Hall. That was why Gus Hall was so loved. Folks, Donald Trump has given us a great example here. Put all the politics aside. Even if I didn't hate everything that Donald Trump stands for, with his anti-Islamic bigotry, with his imperialism, with his hate for immigrants, with his sinister sarcasm, his bullying, even if I didn't hate all of that, even if I agreed with Donald Trump, I could never have an ounce of respect for him after what he did to his supporters, after he abandoned them the way he did, left them on a hill to die, jumped off the sinking ship. Several books to read, fiction and non. Never, never, never could I have any respect for a man who did to his supporters what Donald Trump did today. To the people who still believed. They still believed in the MAGA dream after everything that's gone down, everything that's gone wrong. Still believed somehow he won the election when he didn't. The fact that he could treat his supporters that way. Some people are comparing Donald Trump to Jim Jones, the Kool-Aid man, right? The leader of the People's Temple, right? Whose followers all lined up and drank cyanide. But you know what? I don't think that's a fair comparison. You know why? Yes, did Jim Jones kill all of his followers? Yes, he did, right? He told them to commit suicide and drink cyanide, and they did. But you know what? While his supporters were all lining up and drinking cyanide, Reverend Jim Jones had his bodyguards shoot him in the back of the head. Jim Jones, he went down with the ship. And that alone makes him far better than Donald Trump. Donald Trump, what he did made him worse than Jim Jones, in my book. Reverend Jim Jones, the twisted, false prophet, Kool-Aid man, mass suicide guy who claimed he was Jesus and Lenin combined and murdered his followers, even he is better than Trump. Even he had enough honor to go down with the ship. Now, folks, you can mark my words on this. You can mark my words on what I'm about to say. Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Don't take it out of context. If there's anything I've ever said that I do not want taken out of context, it's what I'm about to say. All right, Trump or Reagan. So don't take out of context what I'm about to say. I'm saying it very carefully. Folks, I am not, let me emphasize, I am not an activist at this time. Sometimes people introduce me as an activist. Well, that's not correct, okay? It's an honest mistake. I was an activist for many years. Sometimes people introduce me, Caleb is a great revolutionary speaker and activist. I'm not an activist right now. I'm not. I don't go to rallies. I don't organize protests. I'm not involved in campaigning for anybody. Right now, at this time in my life, I am not an activist. For many years, I was an activist. But right now, I am not an activist. Let me be clear about that. I am not organizing any rallies. I will not be organizing any rallies anytime soon. I am not organizing any political campaigns. I'm not going out and organize. I am not. I am engaged in socialist education on this YouTube channel. I engage with people in an intellectual way. But I am not an activist. I am not an activist. And I won't be for any time in the near future. So do not take what I'm about to say out of context. I'm not an activist at this time. But if that should change, I can guarantee you I will never do what Donald Trump did. Never would I ever lead supporters of socialism and my movement and what I believe in off the edge of a cliff. I can guarantee you I would never even think of doing what Donald Trump did. One of the saddest things, one of the reasons that we have Donald Trump right now, I am convinced, one of the reasons we have Donald Trump is because a lot of people have issues with their parents. I'm being honest about this, right? The breakdown of the American family, right? And there's all kinds of families. Look, in the United States, we've got mom and dad, we've got 2 moms, 2 dads, we've got single mothers, single fathers. We've got all kinds of different families in the United States. That's fine. I respect all kinds of different families. The way your family is set up is your business and no one else's. Right? There's no reason to shame any single mother. There's no reason to shame, different kinds of families, right? Everyone has the right to have their family the way they want to have their family. Storm the Capitol. Okay, what price? Folks, Donald Trump, if you watch his speeches, to his followers, He's the father they wish they could have. That's what Donald Trump is. He's the father they wish they could have. You know, he pretends that he cares about them. He's an old man. He's tall. And if you listen to the way Donald Trump talks, I'm going to take care of you. You know, we're onto that. You know, he is the big mean daddy they never had. Right? That's really, I mean, it's a psychological trick. He is playing the role of the father. It's Freudian, all right? And he's got it down to a science. He knows what he's doing. And Donald Trump is trying to be the father. Money trolls. Donald Trump is trying to be their father. And folks, what kind of father sends their children into harm's way and doesn't even have their back? What kind of father would do that to his children? Folks, Trump supporters are not our favorite people. A lot of us on this YouTube channel. They certainly don't like us, right? We're communists, and they've been in an anti-communist frenzy for the last 4 years, and they hate China, and a lot of us here like China. They think we're the scum of the earth. They think we are evil, dirty Reds, traitors to the country, snowflakes, dirty hippies, whatever, right? They don't like us. They don't like us, right? But I got to tell you, there are a lot of Trump supporters right now. A lot of QAnon people, a lot of hardcore MAGA men and MAGA women who've got to be in a huge amount of pain. Just a huge amount of emotional pain over what happened this week. Can you imagine thinking that you're part of a movement for a man who's going to save the country, and instead of saving the country, the whole country is laughing at you? The whole country is disgusted with you. And you get sent, you see, you know, your movement sent in to get killed and get made fun of and get... There's got to be a lot of Trump supporters right now who are just in a world of pain. Just don't even know what to say. You know, some of these Trump supporters are saying that, no, this was Antifa. It was all staged by Antifa. Oh, Antifa did it, right? These were all Antifa people dressed up as Trump supporters. Other Trump supporters saying, well, it was the right thing to do, right? This was the deep state. It's all part of Trump's plan. No, Trump has got our back. This is all part of his plan. Like having the FBI round us all up, saying he had nothing. It's all part of his plan. See, Trump has got it all figured out. Don't worry. There's some Trump supporters that are saying, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. They have got to be in a world of hurt and confusion. Just a world of hurt and confusion right now. Right? They've been led off a cliff. They've been betrayed. They put their faith in Donald Trump. They put their faith in a man who saw that they were suffering, saw that their communities had been destroyed by opioids, saw that the jobs had been eliminated, saw that young people have no economic future, saw that, you know, that these wars are not good and that Donald Trump was promising to end it. Donald Trump took advantage of their desire to see a better country and see a better world, to get out of the nightmare facing working people. He took advantage of that, and he sold them down the river. And he hustled them. And he scammed them. And there's got to be so many Trump supporters right now who are just in pain. Just in absolute and utter pain about what they are realizing right now. They don't even know what to make of it. Read what they're saying on social media. They don't know what to make of it. They don't know what to do. The QAnon crowd and the MAGA people, and look on the internet forums now, they have no idea what to do. They are completely at a loss. Folks, let me tell you this. The last thing those Trump supporters need from us right now is statements like, "Nya, nya, nya, nya. We told you so, you stupid." That's the last thing they need to hear right now. If you want to guarantee that we never win them over, say something like that. Folks, a lot of these Trump supporters who are mad about what happened to their communities, mad about the foreign wars, mad about the crumbling infrastructure, mad about the economic ruin of the United States, these people, they don't have any notion of it. They would never guess it in a million years. But these people, they turn to Donald Trump. What they really want is communism. They don't know it. They don't know it. And they don't know it. They hate communists with all their passion. They think communists are the greatest evil. They're loaded with right-wing ideology and anti-immigrant bigotry and anti-Islamic hate. What these people really need, if they want a better country, if they want to end the wars, internet left despises them. They need communism. Only Marxism, only socialism can save America. Only socialism can save America. The only way we can get out of the disaster we're in is if the banks, factories, and industries and major centers of economic power are organized to serve public good and not profits. Only socialism can save America. As long as we have a country run by bankers and billionaires and monopolies, we're going to have more wars and interventions. Only socialism can save America. As long as we have a country where profits are in command, we're going to have neighborhoods that are left behind. We're going to have people hungry and starving on the street. We're going to have unemployment. We're going to have drug addiction. We're going to have a prison industrial complex. Only socialism can save America. The only way forward for the working class people of this country is for capitalism and the rule of profits and the rule of money to be abolished. And if these people really want some of the good things Donald Trump promised, like rebuilding the infrastructure, like ending the wars, if these people really want that, if they really want law and order, meaning not chaos, stability, peace, if they really want that, the only thing that is ever going to be able to deliver on that is communism, Marxism. It's the only thing. And that's why, folks, I am in the process of making a video right now. That's a message from me, a communist, to the Trump supporters. It'll hopefully be posted very soon. I'm working very hard on it. I'm putting music in, lots of graphics. I'm putting more work into this than I think I've ever put into a video before. I filmed most of it today, and I'm editing it, and I'm going to make it really, really spectacular. And I'm making a video, a message to Trump supporters from a real communist. And I am going to tell these people, not taunts, not, "You're a big fat racist, you stupid," not, "Told you so, I knew Trump was a liar the whole time, you idiot." I'm not going to say anything like that. I'm going to say, you love your country, and you love your community, and you are sick of what these billionaires and bankers are doing, you need to abandon racism. You need to abandon anti-immigrant bigotry. You need to stop hating Muslims. You need to stop hating LGBT people. And you need to stand arm in arm with your class brothers. And you need to understand Marxism and socialism and dialectical materialism. You need to understand the science that transformed China from being one of the poorest countries in the world to being, at this point, the second largest economy in the world. You need to understand what it was that gave the people of the Soviet Union the strength to defeat the Nazis. You need to understand what it was that gave the Cuban people the ability to develop a healthcare system that's loved all over the world. You need to understand, the Trump supporters, they always talk about the good jobs, the good industrial jobs. You need to understand what Homer Martin and Samuel Darcy and the leaders of the labor unions back in the 1930s had when they built militant radical unions that made it so that those, steel plants and auto mills and meatpacking centers were good paying jobs. You need to understand what gave working people the ability to fight for Social Security and unemployment insurance. Thank you very much, David Fox. You need to understand. You need to understand Marxism and socialism and dialectical and historical materialism. You need to understand the science, the scientific understanding of the world and reality and the way it works that enabled China to become great again, right? And I am going to engage these Trump supporters. And you know what? If one Trump supporter goes from QAnon to communism, I will have done my job. If one Trump supporter, one single Trump supporter, goes from QAnon to communism, I will declare victory. That in and of itself will be worth it. If one single Trump supporter walks away from the death cult that is leading the country to the edge of a cliff and joins the movement for the liberation of the proletariat and joins the struggle to free our class and all humanity, that'll make that video worth every minute I put into making it. I am going to do it, and folks can laugh at me, and folks can call me a crypto-fash and say that this proves I'm secretly a neo-Nazi, Dugan, white supremacist, whatever. I don't care anymore. Folks, I don't care anymore. You see, that's why I put myself out here on YouTube, because I don't care. I have principles. I've made sacrifices in my life. I risked my life on a ship to Yemen. I've been arrested in protests and demonstrations. I am out there all over the internet with a reputation that a lot of people have gone out of their way to smear and tell lies about me. I don't care. I don't care because I have a purpose in my life. I have principles. I have honor. I have all these things that Donald Trump will not ever understand. I have loyalty and I have beliefs. I have what William Z. Foster and Gus Hall and Eugene Debs and Qasem Soleimani and Mao Zedong had. I have principles. I have something I believe in. I have picked the hill I want to die on, and that hill is the liberation of humanity from the bankers and billionaires who are destroying the country, from the billionaire monopolists that are keeping the world poor so that Wall Street in London can rake in more and more profits. I have picked the hill I am going to die on. I am against imperialism. I am against capitalism. I am against the exploitation of man by man, and I am for the glorious future that we will build beyond the profit system. And so I have absolutely no shame in making this video, and they'll come down on me, Skippy the Bear and Jabba the Bosch and Jacobins and the Jacobin crowd, and all of them will condemn me. How dare he make this video? All Trump supporters should be sent to gas chambers. They're subhuman, illegitimate human beings. We should be wanting to kill them all. We should want them all to get the death penalty. That's not my approach. They're wrong. They're racist, but they can change. I'm not going to stand with the oppression of my class brothers. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. And you know, the woman who died, the woman who got shot, all right, Ashley, I believe was her name. I don't think I agree with a single thing she ever said. I looked at some of her stuff today and I thought, I cannot think of a single thing this woman has ever said that I agree with. She's a raving anti-communist. She's a QAnon conspiracist. But you know what? I read the U.S. Constitution. Thank you, Sharon. I read the U.S. Constitution, and they don't have the death penalty in the U.S. Constitution for being a racist. They don't. They don't have the death penalty in the U.S. Constitution for believing in wild, crazy conspiracy theories. In fact, they don't even have the death penalty in the U.S. Constitution for assaulting a police officer. They don't have the death penalty for vandalizing U.S. property. Whatever she did, whatever she believed, she was wrong. She didn't deserve to die. You know what? She didn't deserve to die. Right? She deserved punishment. She didn't deserve to die. Someone's saying she would have shot me. Well, Okay, I wouldn't have shot her unless I was defending myself. Right. And you know what? This is the problem with law enforcement in this country. Right? George Floyd did not deserve to die. Sean Bell did not deserve to die. Oscar Grant did not deserve to die. Now, to be fair, and this has to be said, she was engaging in much more provocative actions, right? George Floyd was not doing anything wrong, and he died, right? Other people were doing nothing and were killed. She was doing much more provocative things, but whatever she did, whatever she's accused of doing, she didn't deserve to die. And the fact that our police in the United States have been given a license to kill urban African Americans for reaching for their wallets, to kill people of color for being stopped at a traffic light, to kill, who was it? I mean, there's so many names, folks. To kill Breonna Taylor. The fact that our police have been given a license to kill people, a license to execute people on the spot, to conduct summary executions of people, that's a problem. And, people of color are absolutely right to point out that if black people or brown people had done anything near what these, Make America Great Again people did on Capitol Hill, they would have been murdered, in big numbers. That's true. That is absolutely true. That is 100% true. There is a huge double standard there. The hammer of police repression and brutality comes down on black and brown people far more than it comes down on white people. Look, we know the only reason they got as far as they did is because there were elements of the government that were egging them on. If Donald Trump as president, hadn't been on their side, if the Capitol Police had not, to some degree or other, let them in the building, what happened on Wednesday never would have happened. They had support from the top in doing what they did. Educate on racism. But that's not the point. The point is that what I'm seeing from Trump supporters right now about her death, and what I'm seeing from frankly, some progressive people about her death, is both problematic. I'm seeing Trump supporters, instead of saying, wow, Black Lives Matter was right, the police do kill people without provocation. The police do take people's lives needlessly. Wow, Black Lives Matter is right. I don't see that coming from the Trumpers. No, I hear, oh, see, they killed a white woman. Black Lives Matter is full of it. They killed a white woman. Oh, I bet Black Lives Matter don't care about it. That's what I hear from Trumpers. And what do I hear from the progressive movement? I hear true things, like if it had been people of color, they would have shot them all. Yes, that's true, but that's not the point. The point is that all of us Americans are in deep shit right now. Forgive my language. All Americans are in deep shit right now. The policing agencies, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the local cops are all bringing the hammer down. They're driving our wages down. They're destroying our communities. They've got the economy locked down. They're bailing out the big corporations and leaving us behind. And people are getting upset about it. And so to keep us all in line, they are building a massive police state. I hear you, Joseph. They're building a massive police state apparatus right now to beat all of us down, to control all of us, to make sure we just accept it as they start eliminating and canceling us. And whatever she did and whatever other people at that rally did, what Ashley did not merit the death penalty. And what I want is for people in the Trump movement to realize that Black Lives Matter was right all along, that our law enforcement is out of control, our rights are being taken away, and the only way to fight against that is class solidarity. Black and white unite and fight. That's the only way out of this. That's what I want. I want to build bridges to bring this country and this working class together so that we can get out of the mess we are facing as a country. I'm very afraid of this new domestic terrorism law that Joe Biden is proposing. You know who the government will use that against. You know who they'll use it against. I'm very afraid of censorship. Like I said, this channel may not be up here forever, folks, but I'll find another platform. They'll have to cut my tongue out to keep me from talking about what the truth is. Folks, these are hard times here in America. But those of us who believe in socialism, those of us who believe in Marxism, we got to be in this for the long haul. We got to take unpopular stands. We got to be able to endure the rejection of Twitter mobs. We got to be able to be strong. We got to overcome our over-socialization. It's going to be some tough times ahead. But we've got each other. Folks, I'll just end my opening remarks by pointing out that last night I began the process, filed the paperwork for the Center for Political Innovation to become a legal corporation. And shout out to Justin and Gian. Thank you for helping me through that process. And we are in the process of incorporating the Center for Political Innovation as a legal corporation. A legal corporation to engage in publishing and socialist education. We are going to build a network of people that are dedicated to these ideas, dedicated to spreading awareness and class consciousness. They ain't going to be able to stop us. We are going to save socialism so that socialism can save America. We are going to erase all the poisonous, petty bourgeois ideology that has been injected into our movement by the class enemy. We are going to save socialism so that socialism can save America. That's what we're going to do. No one's going to stop us. The future looks bright ahead. It's always darkest before dawn. Solidarity. And on that note, folks, my opening remarks have concluded. My opening remarks have now concluded. So, names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's here today? I'll call you out as I see you. Wisconsin, Belize, PA, Pennsylvania, Brazil, Henderson, Nevada. Solidarity. We can only move forward, says Kinky. Absolutely. Gateshead, England, Delaware. Alrighty. Santa Clarita, Albany, New York, Missouri, NorCal, Shaw from Maryland, Pennsylvania, Jack Dundee, UK, David from Michigan, Ryan from Oakland, Cleveland, Pirate Alex, JT24 in Mississippi, New York City, just got home from work at a factory, Washington State, Baltimore, Ithaca, New York, Glendale, California, Fremont, California, StarCraft, fellow New Yorker, Salem, Seattle, Washington, Factory, New York City, Newark, Ohio, Zach from Oklahoma, Clarksville, Tennessee, Cincinnati, Soviet, Comrade Giles, Nevada, Berkeley, California, Auckland, New Zealand, Nassau County, Long Island, Kieran from San Diego, North County, New York, Unconquered Southerner, Houston, Texas, St. David's, Bermuda, the Lesser Korea, Denver, Colorado, India, Dallas, Texas, Patrick in Los Angeles, Pomona, California, Melbourne, Australia, Longshoreman from Seattle, greetings from Brazil, Long Island, Working Class USA, Treasure Coast, Florida, Tube, British Columbia, Canada, Torrance, California, Billings in Montana, David in Italy, Houston, Juan from Mexico, Nate from Sydney, Australia, Sergey from Arkansas, Sonora, Mexico, Arctic, Norway, Space Coast, Florida. Long Island represent. Char Darling. Don, living in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. Very good. In a factory of ideas. Red Illuminati. Serbia. Brockton, Massachusetts. Real comrade. Very, very good. Very, very good. Glad you all are here. Nebraska, Ukraine, India, Pakistan. Joshua from Palestine. Very, very good. Praveen, India. PNW. Shaniqua from Buffalo, New York is with us. Longtime friend of the show. Sharon from Alabama. Char Darling. Comrade Romano. Very good. Oaxaca. Uruguay. Sham from Cleveland Wasteland. Istanbul. Manchester, United Kingdom. Manchester, United Kingdom. Very good. Naples from Florida. Asked earlier about how I wanted to build Pan-Africanism by showing effective examples of communism, stable Vietnam system. Okay, how I wanted to build Pan-Africanism by showing examples of communism, stable. All right, okay, so Pan-Africanism, successful communism. All right, okay. Very good. Very, very good. Terre Haute, Indiana, the home of Eugene Debs. Very good. Charles Rogers is with us. Very, very, very good. Good stuff. Who else is with us tonight? Who else is with us? Drinking more of my unnamed orange beverage. Who else is with us tonight? Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Bob Marston is with us. Very good. That's right. There's 300 people here, right? We're growing stronger every day. Gaddafi, Banana Juice, Henry George. I can definitely talk about Henry George. All right. Washington State. What am I drinking? Unnamed orange beverage. It's orange juice, but it's our running joke. We call it unnamed diet beverage because we don't want to advertise for a certain cola company. So, you know, Leningrad, very good. We got someone from Leningrad. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Good stuff. Alrighty, folks. We've got a lot of super chats to get through, but that's okay. There's a lot of us here. And like I said, I cannot always Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Michigan, Mark from California, Mr. Red. Appreciate you, Caleb. Drinking orange juice, too. Very good. Very good. Like I said, I don't necessarily give long answers these days when they're long, lots of super chats, but that's okay. I will give you an answer. You send me a super chat, and I give you an answer. So here we go. Democratic centralism and the role of councils in socialism. Those are two separate questions. So I'll do the second one first. Every socialist revolution that has ever happened has built community, local organizations that are key in the revolution. That's what the word Soviet in Soviet Union means. It means council. And during the 1905 revolution in Russia, the workers built these councils called Soviets that were the basis of their revolutionary uprising. In 1917, when it was time, when they were fighting against the Tsar, they brought him back. You know, and in China, they had peasant associations and workers associations. You know, in Cuba, they have the committees to defend the revolution, the CDRs. Nicaragua, they have people's power councils. In Venezuela, they have Bolivarian circles, and that building local councils through which people can get up and explain their ideology and beliefs and engage in the political process and understand the principles of the revolution and try to enforce them at a local level and give their input and direct feedback to the revolutionary leaders. They're very essential. In Iran, they have the Basij councils that function in a very similar way. Every neighborhood has a Basij council, where it's the people that carry out the goals of the revolution, give feedback to the revolutionary leaders, and it really expands the level of democracy, right? People think in the United States, democracy is going to the polls once a year or twice a year sometimes. Well, in a socialist country, there's a communal council, or in Gaddafi's Libya, they called them people's assemblies, right? Popular assemblies. You know, in the Green Book, they talk about them a lot. The engagement of people in the political process is very, very massive. So, yes, councils are important. Now, unfortunately, you know, during the Russian Revolution, there was an anarchist current in Kronstadt who felt like every local council should be completely autonomous. There shouldn't be a central government. They had the slogan "Soviets without communists." Basically, was their slogan. They wanted Soviets without communists. They didn't want the Bolshevik Party to be involved in their local Soviets. They wanted Soviets without communists. And there was the unfortunate event of the Kronstadt uprising. A lot of the Kronstadt sailors were killed, but the Bolsheviks, they were fighting the invaders, right? And the White Army was in there killing people, and they could not have a situation where every local Soviet or council was autonomous. They wouldn't have been able to stay in power. And so it was very unfortunate that revolutionaries killed each other. But yes, the Bolsheviks ended up killing a lot of anarchists because the anarchists were killing Bolsheviks and rising up under the slogan "Soviets without communists." It was a very tragic event in 1921. As far as democratic centralism is a method that Lenin developed for holding together a revolutionary organization. The idea of democratic centralism is twofold. Number one, that there is broad discussion in the organization about what moves it will take, but once a decision is reached, all members carry it out, right? All members are bound to carry out the decision, whether they agree with it or not. And number two, it means that the disagreements within the revolutionary organization are internal only, right? They are internal, and to the masses, the revolutionary organization gives a united face, right? While you might not agree with one policy or another, to the masses, the party gives a united face. That's democratic centralism. And honestly, in some ways it's good, but in some ways I think it needs to be reconsidered. That model of doing things is a little bit outdated. We live in a world of information technology, right? I could not imagine a situation where I had to call a party boss and ask permission every time I tweeted. And you'll notice that a lot of young people that are involved in democratic centralist organizations suddenly they can't talk to you anymore because they might say the wrong thing and they might get in trouble. And some of the more authoritarian and outdated practices you see in some of the older communist groups are rooted in democratic centralism. Democratic centralism was a method that Lenin invented for holding the Bolshevik Party together. The Bolsheviks were a party with amazing revolutionary leaders: Bukharin, Zinoviev, Litvinov, etc., right? These were all great revolutionary leaders. And the only way Lenin could get them in the same group to combine their power, the only way he could do that was to make sure that there was a process through which they would all get heard, but they would all carry out the decision whether they agreed with it or not. And democratic centralism made the Bolsheviks very, very effective. After Lenin died, Stalin, for very clear, obvious reasons, made a big cult around Lenin, right? Lenin was put in the mausoleum, his body was embalmed and, put on display, and Lenin's picture went up everywhere, like a halo around it, like he was a saint. And that was all necessary, right? That was a way to hold the country together, to create ideological unity. But in the process of that, what democratic centralism was kind of got distorted. Democratic centralism, people got the impression the Bolsheviks were this cult of people who said, "Great Lenin, you are our leader, we obey you," and that's not how it was. Often Lenin disagreed with the party. Often Lenin was overruled. Lenin would propose something and the rest of the Central Committee would vote him down. And the Bolsheviks were full of dynamic personalities and revolutionary leaders. And what made Lenin great was his ability to get them all in the same organization doing the same thing. If you read Lenin's writings, he's constantly screaming, "We need to be more disciplined. We need to be more disciplined." And the reason he's doing that is because they weren't. They weren't. I think that democratic centralism needs to be reconsidered for our time. In an age with freedom of information, in an age with much more individual autonomy, forming, a very, very cultish revolutionary group where everyone must repeat the party line at all times, and if you tweet the wrong thing, you're brought up on charges of breaching democratic centralism. We need to get past that. I think that we need to figure out new methods. Folks, I'm not involved in any party right now. I'm not a member of a party. I'm not an activist. I am building a think tank, and this think tank I am building is certainly not a democratic centralist formation. It's a think tank, right? It's an educational institution that teaches people about socialism. So, as we write the bylaws and rules for the Center for Political Innovation, it will not be a democratic centralist organization. That said, maybe some kind of democratic centralism, some form of democratic centralism will be useful in the revolutionary struggle to come. But unfortunately, I think now we're in a period where at least the way it is practiced needs to be deeply reconsidered because it has had kind of a detrimental effect on the revolutionary movement in the United States. All right. All righty. Next question. Next question. Neoliberalism. The person who raised that issue is absolutely right. Neoliberalism, the ideology that says the government is best, that governs least, get the government out of the economy, privatize everything. Milton Friedman, Friedrich von Hayek, Ayn Rand, that stuff is toxic. It's poisonous. And since the 1970s and 80s, neoliberalism has just been wearing down the U.S. economy, stripping the working class bare, driving us into poverty. It is a devastating economic program. And I've done classes. I did a class, Neoliberalism, a study in evil. There's a video of that class online. I have talked about what neoliberalism is, and it is a toxic form of economics. All right. I don't know what LBRY is. Someone keeps saying that I should get an account on LBRY. I don't know what that is, so I'll have to look into it. Recent news with North Korea. Well, Kim Jong-un said that the new president, of the United States, Biden, is probably going to be more hostile to North Korea. And I think that's true. I think Donald Trump, for his own selfish reasons, was kind of interested in maybe signing a deal with North Korea, but couldn't do it, and there was disagreement among his administration about it. Biden doesn't seem to want anything to do with North Korea. Killed more human beings than any other government of the 20th century. Okay. All right. Stalin. Now killing. Alrighty. Okay. Alrighty. Hamilton versus Jefferson. I like Alexander Hamilton. The Communist Party USA in the 1930s, they wrote a lot about Jefferson being the great revolutionary. They even used the phrase Hamiltonian counter-revolution. They were wrong. Christian Parenti, a good progressive writer, wrote a very good book about revolutionary Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was against slavery. Alexander Hamilton favored the U.S. government spending money on infrastructure. He built things like lighthouses. Alexander Hamilton favored giving recognition to the Haitian slave revolutionary government. Alexander Hamilton was far more revolutionary than Jefferson. Jefferson, he wrote a lot of really bombastic phrases in the Declaration of Independence, but his economic theories are complete bunk. Complete bunk. His theory of the yeoman, right? The small independent farmer is completely bunk, okay? This idea that America is going to be a country of single small farmers. Well, pretty soon there's going to be a drought, and some farmers, or the crops are going to fail, and they're going to have to sell their farms to a big farmer. It's a complete economic fantasy. Jefferson raped one of his slaves. He raped his slave, Sally Hemings, and impregnated her. And basically, kept a slave as his sex slave. People say, well, they were in love. Well, if somebody's a slave, it's not really consensual now, is it? So, I'm not a big fan of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, what he did was not good. Hamilton was against slavery. Hamilton never owned any slaves. Hamilton supported the Haitian slave revolutions. So I'm for Hamilton. Unfortunately, now this is where it gets confusing, is that there was a fight between the small farmers, the yeomen, and the big bankers, right, in New York. Hamilton was with the big bankers in New York. And why was that? Well, because the small farmers didn't want to pay any taxes, right? The big bankers in New York were thinking long-term and strategically. So Hamilton made an alliance with Wall Street, and, he built, they paid for the financing of lighthouses, and they created tariffs rather than taxing the population to pay for it, etc. So Hamilton, yes, he was in with the richer people during the time, and I think that's the basis of the confusion. But overall, Hamilton was a far more progressive figure, and Hamilton was opposed to free market policies. You can read what Henry Carey put out in his pamphlets opposing slavery, and they talked about the notion of an American system of economics that was opposed to the British system. And you can read about what they put out, and they talked about how the global free trade system was the British system, the system that starves the Hindu, right, and that keeps countries in poverty and centers the whole economy around the city of London, and that's the British system. And there's a beautiful pamphlet by Henry Carey where he says that the slave system of the South, the plantation system, is actually the British system, and the American system of economics that Alexander Hamilton developed is in opposition to the British system, to the free market, free trade system that slavery was involved with. And Karl Marx actually praised that pamphlet. He loved that pamphlet. And thank you, Herb Bryant, for your super chat. Karl Marx loved that pamphlet written by Henry Carey about how the slave system was the British system and the American system was Hamiltonian. So, there's a lot we can learn from all of this, right? Some of us, we want to just poo-poo all of this. Oh, who cares? We should know economics, folks. Marxism is fundamentally an economic doctrine. It's philosophical, it's political, but at the heart of it is economics. So if you don't understand economics, you don't understand Marxism. A lot of us have been trained to just think, oh, I don't understand economics. Every time anyone starts talking about economics, no, you have to understand economics. You have to understand economics. All righty. All right. Iranian nuclear proliferation. Do Russia and China support it? Okay. That is a dumb question. Okay. Well, let me apologize. There are no dumb questions. I'm going to assume that you were asking that question from a position of good faith, that you just, honestly, you believe Iran is trying to get a nuclear bomb, and you want to know if Russia and China support them. So I apologize for calling it a dumb question. That was a misspeech. I was not correct. It wasn't a dumb question if you meant it in good faith. But here's the thing. Iran has never been trying to get a nuclear weapon. Ever. The International Atomic Energy Agency has monitored every nuclear power plant in Iran, and never once have they ever been in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Furthermore, they were 100% in compliance with the nuclear deal that they signed at Geneva. So never has Iran been trying to get a nuclear bomb. So Russia and China don't support Iranian nuclear proliferation because there is no Iranian nuclear proliferation, number one. Number two, Iran and Russia and China are all signatories of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So they would not support any country that is a signatory of that treaty acquiring nuclear weapons. So the person who asked the question is a little misinformed. And let me apologize for calling it a dumb question. That was not correct. But Iran does not want atomic bombs. Iran has never tried to get atomic bombs. Meanwhile, Israel, Iran's neighbor, has huge stockpiles of atomic bombs. And the U.S. giving aid to Israel is a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Right? If a country hasn't signed the treaty and has nuclear weapons, no signatory of the treaty can give that country aid. The USA giving aid to Israel when it knows Israel has nuclear weapons and Israel has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is a violation of the treaty. The USA is not in compliance with the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty as it arms and funds the Israeli murderers, the Israeli terrorists, and they maintain a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, Iran has followed the International Atomic Energy Agency. It has followed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And furthermore, let me add, Iran is in full compliance with the nuclear deal. So your question is on a false premise. Can we have a Discord that will help drive members? There's already 3 Discords set up, so I can't keep up with that. I just don't have the time. So other people run the Discords. They're kind of like fan chat pages. They're cool. People on there are great. So I'm not opposed to those Discords existing, but I don't control them. I don't regulate them. All right. So open borders. Well, I've said before, we need to stop the raids on immigrant communities. We need full amnesty for all immigrants that are here in the United States. We need to stop the situation where immigrant communities are terrified of calling the police, where people are living in fear, where employers are exploiting, undocumented workers and not paying them a decent wage. We need to stop all of that. And the scapegoating of immigrant workers is unacceptable, and the repression of them, the deportations must stop. I am 100% against anti-immigrant bigotry, 100% against ICE and what they're doing and separating families. And that said, I don't think that the slogan open borders is a good slogan because every country in the world has borders. And Open borders is not a policy. I think we should be more open in who we allow into the country, but open borders is not a policy. Okay, open borders means anyone can just walk across. Every socialist country in the world has borders, it has customs, it has visas, it has passport controls. So, open borders is not a policy. It is just something that sounds very extreme and scares the crap out of most Americans. Most Americans hear open borders and they think, oh, anyone can just walk across the border, right? Every thug and terrorist and murderer and drug dealer can just, and that's not what we want, right? We want an end to the scapegoating of working people. We want an end to the horrendous conditions immigrants face. We want an end to the ICE raids. We want full legalization of all undocumented workers in the United States, hands off immigrant communities. We don't want open borders, right? Under a socialist government in the United States, there will be passports control, there will be customs. We will not be having open borders. Open borders is not a sensible policy. It's not a policy at all, right? But we need to come out in support of the immigrant community, against the scapegoating and the bigotry, etc. But at the same time, we need to not use the slogan open borders because it doesn't make sense to people. It doesn't even make sense. It does not make sense. It's not a policy, right? There's no country in the world that has open borders, so it's not a policy. Alrighty. Five-star movement in Italy. Well, it's part of the new right, but it's a little bit different, right? They're environmental. A lot of the new right are people that say there is no climate change. They really believe in climate change. They're really environmental, but they're friendlier to Venezuela. They're friendlier to China. They're all over the place, right? And that Italy has a long history of Bonapartist figures, obviously going back to Mussolini and fascism. But other than that, they've had other people, Berlusconi, and Italy has had many different figures. And the five-star movement in Italy is a kind of Bonapartist formation. They have some left-wing elements and some right-wing elements. I would not vote for them because I'm a socialist and I would favor a socialist system. They're not fascist though. They're not Nazis. They're not, they're nothing like that, right? So I wouldn't support them, but I don't think you can call them Nazis or fascists. They're problematic in some ways, but they're part of the new right. And to be fair, they recognize Maduro, right? They've signed the Belt and Road with China. They're more independent for Italy, so it's complicated. Mucho complexo, but no, I would not vote for them. All right. Why is Iran holding the oil tanker from South Korea? If I'm not mistaken, I haven't looked into it in great detail. I believe that's related to the fact that South Korea has stolen all kinds of Iranian money, and that South Korea has this is related to South Korea working with the United States to hurt Iran and steal a lot of Iran's resources. But honestly, I don't know the details of it, and so I can't really give a full comment on it. All right. Twitter stock on Monday. I don't know. I don't follow the stock market. I mean, I because of my job, because I report on the economy, it is illegal for me to have any stock. All right. If I were to go and buy stock and then report on the stock market, my reporting could impact the stock market, and that's a crime. If you're a journalist, if you're a TV journalist, if you write for a newspaper, you cannot buy any stock, right, under U.S. law, because then you have a conflict, right? And trust me, people would do this, right? Trust me, right? If people who worked at the Wall Street Journal had stocks, they would write articles. Oh, this stock is doing really well because it would affect the market, and you can't do that. You can't do it, right? So because of that, I don't own any stock. Now, I pay attention to what's happening on the stock market, but yeah, I'm not telling you what Twitter's going to do on Monday. So I'm not telling you what the stock is going to do. So I have no idea. It's certainly interesting that Trump is banned from it. All right. YPG and the synthetic left. Well, look, folks, I don't condemn the Kurds outright. Okay. I don't like the fact that they were trying to overthrow the Syrian government, that they were cooperating with the U.S. imperialists, but at the same time, the Kurds are an oppressed nationality. The Kurds, like any other nationality, they have the right to nationhood. Assad, at one point, he turned over certain territories to the YPG, and he actually gave them control over certain territories in Syria. So it's complicated. And I'm not ready to just say, like some people have. Some people have completely thrown the Kurds under the bus, said, oh, they're collaborating. Well, no. Fidel Castro at one point got some CIA money, and the Sandinistas, early on, they got some CIA money, and they turned into anti-imperialists. So who's to say the Kurds couldn't flip and all of that? So I'm not ready to throw them under the bus. What I always point out, though, is that I am while I don't understand or necessarily approve of everything the Kurds do, right? I'm certainly not a Rojava groupie. One thing I don't criticize them that much. I just, whatever, they're a faction that's involved. They're fighting ISIS, which is a good thing. One thing I do take issue with is that there is a certain current of leftists in the United States who claim to be anti-imperialist, claim to be, anti-war, claim to be opposing capitalism. And you say to them, oh, you oppose Western capitalism, so you're a fan of Cuba. No, Cuba's evil dictatorship. Oh, okay. So you're a fan of Vietnam? No, Vietnam evil dictatorship. Oh, so you're a fan of Iran? No, Iran is an evil dictatorship. No, you're a fan of China? No. They have no support for any socialist government around the world. Whenever there's a CIA color revolution happening, they support it. And you ask them, is there anybody in the world that you support? And the only people that they can support are the YPG. You unrecognized Guaido. The only people that they can support in the world are the YPG, right? The only force in the world that they can tell you they support is a group in Syria, Kurds in Syria, that are being armed by the CIA. Okay, if the only revolutionaries in the world that you support are people who are currently getting guns and weapons from the CIA, I don't know how you can call yourself a revolutionary and look yourself in the face in the mirror. Okay? If the only socialists or revolutionaries you support are groups that are getting guns and weapons from the CIA, you are not an anti-imperialist. Okay? And the fact that all these people only support a group that happens to be getting guns and weapons from the CIA is so ridiculous and crazy to me that it just really exposes these people as, these people are not anti-imperialist. All right. They also supported Hong Kong along with the alt-right, Red Illuminati is pointing out. Yeah, not surprising. Not surprising. All righty. Petty bourgeois rednecks. Look, this comes up a lot, right? You'll point out that there are a lot of working class people who support Trump, and then you will get a bunch of people saying, oh no, Trump supporters are not working class. The average income of the Trump supporter is blah, and there's a lot of middle class people who support Trump. Okay, folks, okay. I'm from a small town in Ohio. I'm from a little town called Orrville, a city of diversified industry. Now, there are some people in my town, like my parents, who vote for Democrats, but the majority of the people in my town are working class people, and the overwhelming majority of people in the town I grew up in voted for Donald Trump. There are millions of working class people who voted for Donald Trump and who support Donald Trump. Okay? I'm sorry. Okay? And I know Trump is not a champion of working people. He's an enemy of organized labor. He's an enemy of working families. Trump is certainly not fighting for working people. You heard my rant against him earlier. But don't deny it, okay? Yes, there's a lot of middle-class elements who support Trump, but there's a lot of working-class people that are Trump supporters, okay? And the more you try to deny that, you're deluding yourself. You're deluding yourself. There are a lot of working-class people who sell their labor power to survive, who have a family and kids, and a lot of those people are Trump supporters. Okay? And if you try to deny that, you're not in touch with reality. There are a lot of working class people who support Donald Trump. I'm just going to say it. It is a fact. They might not after what happened on Wednesday. I think the numbers of Trump supporters are going to boo right now. But there are a lot of working class people that support Donald Trump. And that is a fact, okay? And, Trump doesn't represent the working class. He's a demagogue. But it's just a fact. All righty. Mainstream media language, terrorism, failed publicity stunt? Well, that's an interesting question. Now, some people are wondering, is it possible that Donald Trump arranged for this to happen, right? He arranged for them to get into the Capitol, but he didn't know it would go this far. Is it possible that somebody found out that Trump was doing this and they said, this gets really out of control so we can wreck Trump? Is that possible? Maybe. Is it possible that Donald Trump, expected the Capitol Police to, keep them out of the building, and they didn't because this has been arranged? I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Years from now, we'll find out what exactly went into what went on. Is it possible, though, that Donald Trump knew he was going to lose? He's done with American politics. He's old, and he thought, hey, I just want to go out with a bang. Let's do it. I'm Trump. I mean, we'll see. We will see. We'll find out soon enough. Alrighty. The Frankfurt School. Well, the Frankfurt School, right, so it was around for a long time, and it started out as just kind of a place in Germany that taught Marxism. During the Cold War, it became a center of a deviation in Marxist theory. Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse, the new left, the synthetic left, people who said that the working class are not the creators of history, the intellectuals are, people who said that intellectual alienation and consumerism are the main problem with capitalism, not the problem of overproduction, not the exploitation of man by man. It became a center of kind of cultural revisionism of Marxism, and it was covertly supported by the CIA. That is a fact. Der Monat was the magazine, the CIA magazine that all the big Frankfurt School people were on the payroll of, and it was a CIA magazine. It's Congress for Cultural Freedom. Adorno, Marcuse, there's that book, The Authoritarian Personality. A lot of Adorno's work, and this is in the book. It's in the footnotes. It draws from Wilhelm Reich. Wilhelm Reich, who was this insane person who thought that Nazi Germany was rooted in sexual repression, that the swastika, the reason people supported Hitler is the swastika reminded them of the Human Sex Act, right? They saw the swastika and it made them think of human beings having sex. I mean, Wilhelm Reich was a lunatic and a crackpot, but, the Frankfurt School largely developed a lot of their theories of the authoritarian personality from Adorno. So there's a lot of things here, I'm not a fan of the Frankfurt School at all, honestly. I'm not. And that their theory that, authoritarianism is all the same, and that Susan Sontag, her thing about communism is just the most effective form of fascism, all that comes from the Frankfurt School. It's not good. It's not good. Pouring some more unnamed orange beverage. I'm not a fan of the Frankfurt School. Not a fan. Alrighty. Cool. Reactionaries at Trump rally. Oh, right. Yeah, and I pointed this out. Earlier. But yeah, a lot of the people at the Trump rally, there was a huge number of Falun Gong supporters at the Trump rally, Chinese folks who hate the Chinese government. There were a huge number of Miami Cubans who were bussed in, anti-communist Cubans. There's a whole number of Shah supporters from Iran, exile Pahlavi family supporters who came. And that part of what made Trump work is that there are all of these immigrant exile communities we brought into the United States who hate communists, and we brought them in, and the needs of U.S. imperialism strategically in the world and the short-term vendettas of these immigrant exile communities do not align. And Donald Trump made himself a champion of, Miami Cubans and, Falun Gong and all these fanatical anti-communist exile communities. And that this is a problem we have in the United States, right? The United States, if the communist revolution happens or an anti-imperialist revolution happens anywhere in the world, all the people who flee from there all come to the United States. And that has tainted our politics like crazy. That's why all these people walking around go, oh, communism's horrible. I just talked to this Eastern European guy who fled from Romania, and he said it was evil and horrible. And then I always say to the person, and what is Romania like now? Well, it's better. Now it's free. Well, actually, no. All the polls in Romania show that life was better under socialism in Romania. But the Romanian exile guy, the fanatical anti-communist who fled in 1950, You know, he's never going to tell you that, right? And he's the expert. I lived under it. I'm from Romania. Oh, shut up. You know, I hate those folks, right? These people will go out like the Shah supporters, the Pahlavi people. They will rally for sanctions on Iran. Iranians can't get the medicine they need, they die. And these, you know, the Sunset Park crowd, you know, the LA Iranians, Pahlavi crowd, they cheer that their own people can't get medicine. Yay! Right? They starve my people. Yay! Woo! People of the same nationality as me don't get medicine. Woo! Yeah! And the Gusanos are the same way, right? You know, Cubans can't get medical supplies, can't get airplane parts. Woo! People, my own people died. Yeah! Hey, Trump, can you please bomb my own people? You haven't killed enough of my own people yet. These are self-hating pieces of I have no respect for them. You know, American anti-communists, they're ignorant or whatever. But these people, they literally hate their own people. They want the U.S. government to starve and murder their own people. They are disgusting, disgusting human beings. I mean, I'm sorry. If you know, I mean, okay, if 9/11 happened, which it did, 9/11 happened, and I said, wow, that was great, and moved to Saudi Arabia, and hung out with the bin Laden family, and every time there was a terrorist attack in the United States, I went, yeah, I would be a piece of garbage. Well, that's what these people are, right? You know, their country gets bombed and attacked, and they run to the country that bombs and attacks it and sit there and cheer for it. And they hope that they can fit in with all the white Americans. Look at me, I'm just like you. See, I hate my people too. I hate my nation too. I want to destroy my nation too. That's I mean, it's despicable to me. I mean, they are really, really despicable people. And everyone thinks they know all about communism or all about Iran or all about China because they talk to one of these people. These people don't represent their people. They don't represent their people. Right? They do not represent their people. Fact, okay? The Shahs of Sunset Park, the Miami Gusanos, you know, the Ukrainians of Cleveland do not represent their people, okay? These are hateful anti-communist fanatics who have a relationship with somebody in the U.S. government who got them a visa, and they do not represent their people. And I'm so sick of people thinking that, well, no, I met a guy from Cuba, and he told me, oh, yeah, he'll tell you anything. He'll tell you anything. You know, there's a cartoon someone told me about, right? You know, and it's like a stray dog, and he's talking to this other dog, and he said, you know, back when I was in Cuba, I was a poodle. You know, I mean, it's like they were all kings and queens before Castro showed up. I mean, it's awful. You know, I don't like George Lopez. I really don't like George Lopez. But I will say one of the best moments, he did have a good moment on his show, right? George Lopez, not a good comedian. On his show, though, he had a great moment, I thought. It was beautiful, right? Where, you know, the mom, his wife, who's Cuban, is yelling at her daughter, and she says, you know, your uncles right now are in jail just for speaking out against Fidel Castro. And George Lopez on the show, he turns to his wife and says, that's not why they're in jail. I just thought that was funny. It's hilarious, right? Because every Miami Cuban, you know, the only reason anyone ever goes to jail in Cuba is because they disagreed with Castro. It's like, that's not why they're in jail. I thought that was hilarious. But anyway, all right. Okay. Okay, more about the petty bourgeois. Yes, there is a big petty bourgeois current in the Trump movement, no doubt about it. That's true, and maybe, yeah, a lot of them are going under and becoming more proletarianized and are very mad about it, especially during the pandemic. Alrighty. Would RFK have been a good president? Maybe. I mean, let's remember that JFK had strategically aligned himself with the civil rights movement. He'd stabbed them in the back a couple times, but he had gone back and forth. JFK had not been excited about going into Vietnam. RFK was presenting himself in kind of an optimistic way. You know, the theme, his favorite song, interestingly, that he picked as his campaign theme before he was murdered, RFK, was a Broadway song from the musical Man of La Mancha, which was popular in the 60s at the time. And it's to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe. It was an optimistic song. Look up that song. I'm not a good singer, but look up that song, right? It was a very optimistic song, right? And he could have brought perhaps some optimism back to the United States. Look, I mean, Kennedy had a lot of problems, right? JFK had a lot of problems. RFK never became president, but, you know, I mean, to be fair, right before he was killed, Kennedy JFK wanted to make the moon mission a joint moon mission. He wanted to send one rocket to the moon that would have a Soviet astronaut and an American astronaut. Imagine how much different the world would be if Kennedy's vision of a joint moon mission, not a space race, but a joint moon mission had happened, right? Think about that. People don't think about that. That's been kind of buried. But in his final UN speech, right before he was killed, JFK wanted a joint moon mission. That's big. That is big. That is not a small fact. All right. America lost credibility. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, the whole country's hanging our heads in shame now. What happened on Capitol Hill was reprehensible. All right. Has the extreme right become mainstream? I mean, depends what you mean by the extreme right, right? I mean, libertarianism has certainly become mainstream. Neoconservatism is on the defensive. Right-wing populism is much more common than it was before, but we really don't have like Julius Evola stuff here. We don't have like, really far right stuff like they have in Europe here. We have a lot of confusion. I think Americans are just lost. We have a confused identity. We don't know who we are. All righty. All right. They say that settlerism is the primary contradiction in the United States. Well, look, the settler history of the United States has certainly tainted the country, right? That's a curse hanging over us that we need to deal with. I've always said, we need to refound the country, right? I mean, the country needs to be reborn, basically, and get away from that curse hanging over us of the death of the Native Americans and the history of Jim Crow and slavery. And yes, the settler issue is big. So, I mean, I guess in a sense that's an issue, but I think the people who promote that book, Settlers, and say there's no such thing as a white worker, I don't buy that. All right. Several books to read, fiction and nonfiction. Okay. In terms of fiction books to read, I don't read fiction very much, but since we're in the middle of an economic crisis, I would recommend reading John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. That's a very good book that lays out some kind of basic Marxian economics, actually. There's a lot of like little allegories in it that explain Marxism. What else? In terms of fiction, I read Mother by Maxim Gorky. That's a good novel about a group of revolutionaries in Tsarist Russia. It's considered the first work of socialist realism. I would recommend that. There's a book called The Iron Heel by Jack London, a very exciting adventure novel about a socialist revolution in the United States and fascism and stuff like that. That's good. Ceausescu. So that might be interesting. All right. Someone Reagan is the Antichrist. Well, Reagan really pushed neoliberalism more than any other president in U.S. history. That is certainly true, and he rolled back a lot of the progressive atmosphere that came out of the 1960s. Carter kind of set the stage for what Reagan did. But yes, Reagan was a pretty awful president, and the repercussions of his economic policies and foreign policy are still with us, no doubt about it. And the way he just, what price will these Trump supporters pay? We shall see, right? I mean, a lot of them are going to be prosecuted. They probably want to make an example out of them, right? They probably want to make an example out of them. And, yeah, I mean, we'll see. We shall see. All right. Someone said Soleimani controls Iran's foreign policy. I'm not sure I believe that. Now, the person has, said that in a super chat. Anyone can say anything in a super chat. Prove that to me. I really don't necessarily believe that. But, if you believe that, I mean, I don't know. Prove that to me. Is it possible? Sure, but I'll believe it when I see it. All right. Internet left despises Trump people, and that's absolutely true, right? It just spits on people. Cancel culture. You're no good. You suck. You're evil. That doesn't help. It's not what we need in this time. All right. Does the communist movement need a Trump? No, because Trump is a charlatan. Trump is a con man. Trump is deceptive. Trump is a bully. Trump is selfish. Trump is a lot of bad things. So no, I don't think the communist movement needs a Trump. We need more voices. Let me put it that way. I think more people should set up a YouTube channel. More people should make videos. More people should write articles. One thing that absolutely, the worst thing I've ever observed, didn't happen to me. I was in the room. This is the worst thing I ever saw in my whole time as a communist activist was in Chicago. in Chicago in the year of 2010. I was in Chicago. I was helping, do some activism there, and I was putting up posters or whatever. And I went to a class by the Spartacist League, this little tiny Trotskyist group, the Spartacist League. And it was this class, communist youth class, by these Trotskyists. And I was from a different party, but I went to the class because I was interested. And, there's like young college-aged kids at the class. And there's a girl in the class who's with them, and she has like a feminism tattoo, I think, and she's got like kind of the punk rock look going on. So I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm from Cleveland, whatever. And so the girl who's in this class, she says to me, "Oh, my band, they played a show in Cleveland." And I said, "Oh, you're in a band?" I'll never forget this. The old man who was at least 60 or maybe even 70 years old in the room, the old boomer leftist. She says, "Oh, I'm in a band, yeah. My band played a show in Cleveland." I said, "Oh, you're in a band?" And the old boomer leftist turns to her and he says, "Didn't we talk about this?" And she's like, "Oh, I used to be in a band." Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The way that these communist groups, you get young people full of energy, full of knowledge, who want to become better speakers, better writers, better musicians, better performers, the way they get stifled in ththese groups, the way these groups just kind of silence people. It's all about the leaders. It's all about these boomer leftists, right? The communist movement in the United States has gone since the times they've been in charge, but no one cares. It's all about them, right? And no, you're going to be in our group. You can't be in a band, right? You're going to be in our group. Well, the important leaders of the group give all the speeches. You're an inferior. No, we need to get over that. I'm sorry. And a lot of these boomers, right? I'm sorry that I used to be in a group and it was controlled by a small group of people who sucked. Okay? I'll just be real, right? I mean, some of these people that were in charge of the group I'd in, they were like the big bosses. They had never read Lenin. They didn't know what a proletarian was. They were dumb as a box of rocks, but they were in charge. Oh, no, and they had to be the center of attention all the time, and anybody else who came along was like, it was an affront on them. And these, and the way they bully people and stifle people and silence people is completely unacceptable. And so many young people, they join these communist groups, they work their butt off, they get taken advantage of, and they move on with their lives, right? It's a pet peeve of mine. But a lot of people, go to any other country in the world, any other country in the world. Being a communist is not a phase, right? In the United States, being a communist is like a phase, right? After college, right? It's like, you're in college, you join a communist group, you do it for a couple years, then you kind of grow out. You grow out of it, right? You grow out of it. That's not how it is in the developing world. You don't grow out of the Communist Party of India Marxist. You do not grow out of the Venezuelan Communist Party. You do not grow out of the movement towards socialism in Bolivia. You don't grow out of the Communist Party of China. You don't grow out of the MPLA of Angola, right? You don't grow out of communism in any country where they have big, effective, strong communist parties. It's not a phase. It's not a phase, okay? It's something people do for their whole lives. It's something people give the whole of their lives to. They grow up in it. They raise their kids in it. They have neighborhoods they control. But in the West, being a communist, since the 1960s, really, not, before that, in the 50s, the Communist Party USA, before McCarthyism especially, but in the West, being a communist is a phase, right? It's this weird thing that college kids do that people just kind of grow out of it, and it's, why is that? Because after the 1960s, a lot of boomers started groups, and these groups became more and more and more irrelevant over the course of the 1970s. And by about 1980, these groups were pretty much not relevant any longer. And so they kind of degenerated into scams. They just degenerated into hustles, right? It's one or two boomers' little hustle, right? And they get to pretend they're important. They're the grand chairman of the great fourth committee of the 12th International, and they get to sit there and feel like they're so important, and their group has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller, less and less irrelevant. But look at me, I'm the great, and it's And then, if one of these other boomers disagrees with them, well, they gotta have a split, and then they gotta have another split, and they gotta have another split, and then and there's a million of these little groups, and all of them are one or two boomers' little ego trips, and they hustle young people, and young people join, and they get taken advantage of, and they work their butts off, and then pretty soon they realize that the group ain't gonna grow, and it's not going to see any progress. Plus, there's really not a future for them in the group. The group exists to fulfill the egos and the incomes of some old boomers. And so there's really not a future for them in the group. And so they just kind of grow out of it and become normal, everyday people. And it's really fucking sad. I'm sorry, I'm cursing. I don't normally do that. I have no idea about that. I have no idea about any of that. Okay, I have nothing to do with that far right organization you mentioned, so that's not an appropriate question, Brave. All right, but no, they just kind of move on with their lives, and it's really really sad. It's really really sad, and that's why communism in the United States is irrelevant. It's irrelevant because it's for most people who get involved in it, people since the 80s, 90s, anyone who gets involved in it, it's a phase. It's a phase. They grow out of it. They move on. And these organizations, they just get smaller and smaller and less effective. But hey, these old boomers, they get to feel really, really special about themselves and really, really important. And everyone gets to look at them and be in awe of how great they are. And, it's pathetic. It's disgusting. And part of the reason I'm not building a new party is I'm building a think tank is because I don't want to get involved in this. I don't want to perpetuate this illusion. None of the parties in the United States, with all due respect, there's a lot of people on here who are members of parties, and I'm sorry. I know I'm probably stepping on toes here. None of these parties in the United States are real parties. Okay? None of these parties in the United States are real parties. Class. Armed. None of these parties in the United States are real parties. They're all just kind of, I don't know what you want to call them. They're LARPing, they're performative, they're a couple people's little ego trip. It's an illusion that a couple people hold on to pretend they're important. And if I were to form, so that's when I was, on my own, people are like, are you going to start your own party? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start the Working Class Liberation Fight Back Socialist League. Come on. No, if I started a new party now, it would be a joke. The funny thing is now, as I'm forming the Center for Political Innovation, we probably at this point, even though we haven't even opened the membership yet, there's no formal membership yet, at this point we probably have more members than a lot of these little parties do, which is kind of hilarious, right? I'm in touch with literally hundreds of people. But, honestly, in all honesty, none of these parties are really parties. And so if I were to form a new party that was another joke party, it wouldn't make sense. I'm forming a think tank. And the Center for Political Innovation, you can be in any of these groups and join it. There is no ban on dual membership. If you're in a Trotskyite group or an anarchist group or a social democratic group or an ML group or a Hojist group or whatever, it is open to everybody. It is open to everybody. So there you go. It is absolutely open to everybody. And it's a think tank. It's not a party. I'm not forming a new party because forming a new party would not be a good thing to do. Alrighty. All right. Compromise on family and social issues. Look, I have always said that if you are gay, that is your business. If you are lesbian, that is your business. If you are transgender, that is your business. And no one should ever be allowed to discriminate against you for being that way. No one should ever be able to tell you you don't have the right to be that way. You should have the right to organize your family however you want to do it. You should have the right to control your own body and live as whatever gender you want to live as. And no one should ever discriminate against you or ever give you a problem with that. Your life is your life, your body is your body, your family is your family, and that's the way it is. That's the way it is, right? In the United States, we have the separation of church and state, right? It is a simple matter of civil liberties. People in the United States have the right to have their family the way they want to have their family. They have the right to live their life as they want to live their life. They have the right to engage in sexual practices as they want to with consenting adults, right? What people do is their business, and that needs to be the understanding. If you are personally, I am a Christian. I have no problem with anyone being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. It doesn't violate my faith. I think that is in line with Jesus' teachings. I have no problem with anyone being that way. However, if you are a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Zoroastrian or whatever you are, and your belief says, well, that's not right, then don't do it. And you have the right to maintain your religious community and to say and to teach in your religious community that it's not right. But the second that you start trying to pass laws to say that gay and lesbian people can't have their family, or transgender people can't, be transgender or whatever, at that point, no, that's not okay. The compromise on social issues needs to be, you can live your life the way you want, and I can live my life the way I want. That needs to be the compromise. Same goes for freedom of religion. I do not understand what these anti-Islamic bigots do not understand. I don't get it. I don't understand how they can, okay, if you have your church and no government messes with your church, then Muslims can have their mosque and no government can mess with it. And Jews can have their synagogue and no one can mess with it. And Sikhs can have their temple, right? And the reason that you can't ban mosques is because if they ban mosques today, then they can ban synagogues and they can ban churches, right? And that's how religious freedom works. And that's also how freedom of conscience works. So that's all, okay? Now, there are some people on the left that'll be like, oh, no, 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 no. I want to outlaw every church or every religion that's, well, I'm not with you there, okay? People have the right to their religious beliefs. If people personally feel that gay, lesbian, transgender is not right, that's on them. If you want to try to change their minds, go right ahead. But they're allowed to think that. They're allowed to have their organizations that think that. They're allowed to practice their religion in a way that doesn't think that. You can have your family your way. You can live with your body the way you want to live. You can have sex with whoever you want as long as they're a consenting adult, however you want, right? Your body is your business. I am not Eastern Orthodox. I am a Protestant Christian. What was the other question? Thoughts on the rise of astronomy, spiritualism? I can't. All right, I'll write it down. I think you mean astrology. Spiritualism. Cults in West. No, I'm not Eastern Orthodox. I'm Protestant. But, that's the way we do things here in the United States, right? The United States was settled by all kinds of diverse religious communities, and that's what we do. I mean, that's just the way it works, right? And that, that's it. That's it, okay? Yeah, I'll answer the astrology thing. I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit, all right. A lot of things to get through, but that's okay. That's okay. But yeah, that's the attitude we have to have here, right? I'm sorry. We don't have an establishment of religion here in the United States. And that's the compromise, right? You can be your way, and no one will bother you. And other people can be their way, and no one can bother you. And we need to have a libertarian attitude on these things. All right. How do we educate Trump supporters on racism and stuff? With patience. Patience. And listening. And not condemnation. And not hostility. But engaging them. And the main way to educate on racism is with a class line, is getting people to understand that it is in astrology. It is in their interest, their economic interest, to oppose racism. That every gain the American working class has ever had has been in a time of opposing racism. Black and white unite and fight. That racism hurts all workers. It hurts the black and brown people the most, of course. Moral relativism. This is universalism. It hurts black and brown people the most, obviously. But no, I mean, racism hurts all workers, and we oppose, all racism, and that it is in the economic interest of white workers to oppose racism. All righty. Pan-Africanism, they tried to win people to Pan-Africanism by pointing to successful examples of communism. Well, that's true. I mean, Kwame Nkrumah, a leader of Ghana, who was a socialist, an African socialist, he was a Pan-Africanist, and that there is a long history of socialists and Pan-Africanists working together. There's a long history of that. Gaddafi, at the time of his death, he was building an independent African currency and trying to form an African bank. So, yeah, All right, Henry George. Henry George was an economist. He was around at the time that Marx was alive. He didn't agree with Marx. Henry George believed that land should be nationalized and people should pay rent on the land to the government. The government should be the single landlord, and there should be a tax of the land's value. Basically, the nationalization of all land, and you rent your land from the government. Political philosophers. That was what Henry George believed, and it was kind of a halfway solution, right? It's not socialism, but it was like the idea was that that would lay the basis for economic equality. Marx and Henry George didn't agree, but interestingly, when Henry George ran for mayor of New York City, when he ran for mayor of New York City, Karl Marx and the Marxists of New York City supported him, which I think is interesting because he was a progressive. He was seen as a populist who called for economic reforms that would benefit working people. One thing I think is neat is that the theme song of the Henry George movement it's a great theme song, and it's really great to sing in a group. And it is still actually the theme song of the Liberal Democratic Party of Britain, which I think is hilarious, because the Liberal Democrats at this point are not a very left-wing party. They're kind of a centrist party. But the Liberal Democratic Party, their theme song is the land, 'twas God who made the land, the ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with a ballot in our hand? God gave the land to the people. It's a great song, right? The land, 'twas God who made the land, the ground on which we stand. Why should we be beggars with our ballots in our hands? God gave the land to the people. I love it. It's a great populist song, right? Against landlords, right? And the verses of the song, I don't have them all memorized, but they're great. There's a line about what is it? Why should we blah blah, something, while the landlords take the best, make them pay their taxes on the land just like the rest. I mean, it's like a populist song against landlords. So I'd like to popularize it, right? I think that we should adopt, as a socialist movement, we should adopt the land song, the Henry George anthem. I think the socialist movement should reclaim it. Maybe we need to adjust the lyrics a little bit. Maybe not so much God stuff in it, because that could be off-putting to atheists and people that are not religious. But I like the land song. It's a great song. All right. Stalin and Mao killing, what happened? All right. Okay. All right. All right. Again, don't take what I'm about to say out of context. All right. Right? First of all, capitalism has killed so many millions and millions and millions of people that any of these body counts they give for communism are ridiculously unfair, right? So, I mean, they give these huge body counts, big numbers. They don't all agree, right? Right? I mean, it's, this many 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, big numbers they give for communism, okay? Right? World War I, 20 million workers sent to their deaths so the capitalists could fight over the world. Famines all the time in India that resulted in mass deaths of malnutrition because the British Empire was keeping India as a captive market. The Chinese government recently estimated that as a result of the Opium Wars and keeping China impoverished as a captive market, over 100 million people in China died, right? 100 million people in China died, right? That you can talk about how the British created famines in Iran, and that free trade economics in country after country after country has starved millions of people, killed millions of people. There have been all kinds of brutal dictators who were aligned with Western capitalism and slaughtered people in mass. If we were to do the death toll of capitalism, the way this communism death toll that we hear about is added up, the numbers it would be impossible to calculate them all. Seriously, right? I mean, it would be astronomical. right? To add up all the Native Americans killed, add up all the black people killed on the Middle Passage, right? I argued about this with Stefan Molyneux. He tried to run this number on me, right? Oh, how many people have to die before communism? I mean, if you play that game with capitalism, I mean, you would never be able to calculate the hundreds and hundreds of millions of people killed. So it's a completely ridiculous game these people play. Let's be real. We all know that the Soviet Union did not have the level of free speech we have in the West. China doesn't have the level of free speech we have in the West. That, Iran, Venezuela, Venezuela is an exception. They're pretty open. But Cuba, countries like that, they don't have the same level of freedom that we have in the West. That's true, right? And that these countries have had to fight to defend themselves, right? They've been, these countries have been under attack and facing violent insurgencies, and that they've had to develop rather rigid authoritarian systems in order to remain in power. And that they're building socialism on the basis of scarcity and underdevelopment. They've been kept poor by imperialism. They've never even been through the capitalist level of development. Imperialism prevented them from developing. Domination by Western banks prevented them from developing. And so they've been forced to build what they have on the basis of scarcity and poverty and build up, right? China is, at this point, people say it's becoming the strongest economy in the world. The USA has been usurped, but they've gone from being the poorest, the sick man of Asia, all the way up to being what we are, at the level, that we're possibly at now. So these countries, right, they have struggled. They have faced conditions far different than what we've faced in the West. We've been developed here in the West for hundreds of years. These countries have fought the imperialists tooth and nail for the right to be industrialized. And in order to do that, they have had to tighten up and be authoritarian. And there have been bad things that have gone on. And there have been examples of repression that was not right. And we should not pretend that didn't happen, right? Gulags existed, and that was awful. And a lot of people who shouldn't have been in those gulags were in gulags. And no one supports that. And no one thinks that was a good thing. But you know what? I celebrate Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving comes around, I'll sit down, I'll eat a turkey. Does that mean I'm celebrating the genocide of Native Americans? Of course not. I don't condone the genocide of Native Americans. That was wrong and horrendous. But I'm not celebrating the genocide of Native Americans. I'm celebrating time with my family. I'm celebrating being thankful. Well, in the same way that I can celebrate Thanksgiving, I can celebrate the Soviet Union. I'm not celebrating gulags. I'm not celebrating the Great Terror. I'm celebrating one of the poorest countries in the world, industrializing very rapidly, launching the world's first spacecraft, electrifying the whole country, raising millions of people out of poverty, defeating the Nazis, giving aid to the Black Liberation Movement in the United States, wiping out illiteracy, I'm celebrating all the achievements that show that we don't have to have capitalism. That's what I'm celebrating. I'm not celebrating those bad things. I can celebrate China's achievements. I can celebrate Cuba's achievements. We can all recognize that bad things happen in the history of socialism. We can learn from the good. Why shouldn't we learn from the good, right? If countries that are deeply poor have been able to raise themselves up out of poverty, have huge economic achievements, and do all of these things, they've been able to do all of that. That shows we don't have to have capitalism. And that shows that we don't have to, they say, well, capitalism is bad, sure, but every time you try to get rid of it, it only makes life worse. Malarkey. Right? Life got a lot better for people in the Soviet Union because of socialism. Life has gotten a lot better for people in China because of socialism. Life has improved for people vastly in many countries in the world because of socialism. Okay? And we can celebrate that. And we can acknowledge the bad things happened. We might argue that this is exaggerated or that is exaggerated, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. Socialism works as an alternative to capitalism. There are things we can learn from Cuba and China and Russia and other countries that have had socialism, and that's really all we need to take from it. I am not a blind apologist of any Soviet leader. I will never sit here and try to tell you Stalin did nothing wrong, Mao did nothing wrong, Fidel Castro did nothing wrong, because if I did that, I would be talking out of my behind, because I don't know that. I'm not a historian. And historians don't even know that. Historians argue with each other all the time about all kinds of minutiae and details about this stuff, and it doesn't really matter. I do not know anyone who advocates that we go to Cuba or Russia or China, dig up Mao, dig up Stalin, dig up Fidel Castro, bring them back from the dead and put them in power in the United States. I don't know anyone who advocates that we do such a thing, and I think it would be a complete waste of time to try and do that. The only type of socialism that is ever going to work in this country is going to be a unique socialism specifically designed for our conditions in this country. In China, they call their system socialism with Chinese characteristics. And when socialism comes to the United States, we won't call it this, we'll have another name for it, but what it will be in essence will be socialism with American characteristics. It will be a unique form of socialism designed to address our specific conditions right here in this country. That's what socialism will be when it comes to the United States. And our job as revolutionaries is not to copy what Russia did, copy what China did, copy what Gaddafi did in Libya, copy what Ba'athist Arab socialism has done in Syria, copy Cuba, copy Venezuela. Our job is to study Russia, study China, study Venezuela, study Bolivia, study Cuba, study Syria, learn from all of it, but blindly follow none of it. Learn where they went right, learn where they went wrong, and figure out what we can apply to save America from the crisis we are in right now. The reason we need socialism in the United States right now is not because the Russians made really nice hats. The reason we need socialism right now is not because Mao wrote this really awesome book called The Little Red Book. The reason we need socialism is because right now there are hungry children in the United States whose parents are worried about losing their food stamps. The reason we need socialism in the United States right now is because there are people that are worried about losing their homes because of their medical bills. The reason we need socialism right now is because all across this country, in municipalities around this country, they are unpaving the roads. This is the richest country in the world, and they are taking roads that are paved roads, and they're pulling up the asphalt and pulverizing it. Where you used to have a paved road, you have a dirt road. That is why we need socialism in the United States. We need socialism in the United States because right now, fracking companies owned by people with names like Carnegie and DuPont and Vanderbilt are making loads and loads of money off of the natural gas in the soil of Pennsylvania, while the people of Pennsylvania are having trouble paying their bills, having trouble eating, their kids can't go out and work on their own, they're struggling to get by, while a bunch of bankers and billionaires are getting rich off of the natural gas under the ground in Pennsylvania. That is why we need socialism. That is why we need socialism. We need socialism so that instead of the country getting poorer and poorer and poorer, while a group of international financial billionaires, corporations, and fat cats enrich themselves. And not only do they enrich themselves by destroying our country, they enrich themselves by destroying countries all over the world. Instead of feeding the hungry children of America, they bomb and destroy people in Syria and Iraq and Libya. It's because of that. It's because of this global system of imperialism where a few multinational corporations get rich while all humanity is driven into deeper and deeper poverty. It is because of that that we need socialism here in the United States. And I want to know what the Russians did and what the Cubans did, what the Koreans did, what the Chinese did in order to build socialism, so that when we figure out how to save America from the hell created by the monopoly billionaire class, the war profiteers, the prison profiteers, the opioid manufacturers, the hell created by this rotten system. When it's time to stand up and save America from it, I want to know how we can give America the best socialism we possibly can. I want to learn from all the mistakes made around the world. I want to not repeat the errors of other socialist countries in the past. I want to apply our knowledge so that we can make America a non-imperialist country, a country that doesn't that doesn't live by exploiting other countries, a country that has win-win cooperation with people all over the world, and that when we make America a socialist country, it's going to be the best goddamn socialism you've ever seen. It's going to be some hell yeah, kick-ass American socialism. That's what I want, and that's why I studied Cuba and Russia and China and Venezuela. And if that makes me an evil, tanky Stalin apologist, why, guilty as charged. Next question. Why did the European Union stop recognizing Juan Guaido? Well, I don't know the specific reason. I know Italy, did not recognize Juan Guaido. I think there were some other EU countries that didn't recognize Juan Guaido. But if you look at what's going on in the United States right now, not exactly the best time to follow the United States. The United States isn't looking like the strongest country. So the United States proclaiming Juan Guaido as the, Trump's little friend who came to his State of the Union address and waved and looked kind of like Frankenstein at Trump's State of, maybe putting your money on that guy, not the best thing to do at the moment. Ceausescu. Hey, Ceausescu was leader of Romania. He presided over a lot of really big improvements in the lives of people in Romania. He presided over a lot of people in Romania's lives getting better, illiteracy being wiped out, new universities built, new power plants, new hospitals built. In the 80s, he joined with China and Deng Xiaoping and was cutting ties with the Soviets and was hostile to the Soviets. He got in debt to American banks, and that kind of hurt their economy. And the 80s was not a good time in Romania economically. So I don't know. I mean, he's a mixed figure, like all the socialist figures, right? I mean, there's many socialist leaders throughout history, Enver Hoxha in Albania, Tito in Yugoslavia, right? So, okay, well, Ceausescu, I mean, as a result of his socialist policies, there was big improvements in Romania. But in the 80s, there were some big, big problems due to the debts and stuff. And then he was overthrown in a coup, and the coup, he was executed publicly, I believe, and, and it was like a lynching by the right wing, and so he was killed. And then after that, austerity came in. And now Romania, just like every other formerly socialist country, people say life was better under Ceausescu. Does that mean Ceausescu did everything good? No. I mean, I'm sure he did many bad things, but life was better before capitalism came in. Next question. All right. Should the working class be armed? Well, folks, I believe that if you are in an area where you have the right to legally be armed, that is a decision that you and your family need to make together and need to make with caution. Right? I do not condone or discourage legal gun ownership. I do not ever encourage anyone to do anything illegal. No one should ever have an illegal gun or break the law. But if you are in an area, which I am not, by the way, I'm in New York City, and you cannot have a gun here, and I do not have a gun. But in New York City, you can't even have a hunting rifle without a permit. So I don't have a gun. But if I were in Ohio or Pennsylvania or even upstate New York, and I was in a place where I could legally own a gun, I would have to discuss that, right? And me and my wife and whoever else I might be living with would have to make that decision on our own. I'll leave it at that, basically. You have the right under the U.S. Constitution. According to the U.S. Constitution, it is your Second Amendment right. It is a constitutional right to have a gun. That said, many people argue that that's not right. That actually the Second Amendment just means the right to have a state militia. Or I'm not a constitutional scholar, but as the Supreme Court currently argues, you do have the right to have a gun. So you need to make that decision on your own. And that's that. And if you want to practice legal gun ownership, that's your decision. Now, as far as any organized gun group, I will say what I have said many times, which is I have absolutely nothing to do with any of those groups. I do not condone or condemn their existence, right? Socialist Rifle Association, etc., right? Redneck Revolt, whatever. Jimmy Dore. I don't condemn or condone them, but if you're involved with any of those groups, stay the hell away from me. Stay the hell away from me. I do not want to go to prison. And I'm on here. My face is all over the internet talking communism. I'm all over international TV. So if you're doing something with a gun group, stay 100 miles away from me. That's it. Stay 100 miles away from me because I am watched like you wouldn't believe. I am not a private citizen unnoticed. So if you were doing something with a gun group, what I do in my very public educational work and what you do with your little gun group have nothing to do with each other. So stay very, very, very far away from me. All right. Okay. Alrighty. I'm sorry. What's the question here? Thanks for responding, American people in chat, but it was not convincing. Are you against your government's policies? Of course, I'm against my government's policies. I'm very, very against my government's policies. Alrighty. Astrology, right? Spiritualism, cults in the West. Well, astrology, spiritualism, cults in the West. I mean, look, I don't know enough about astrology. I had a girlfriend a long time ago who was into it, and I don't know, whatever. I don't know enough about it. Spiritualism, look, spirituality is something we all have to deal with on our own. It's all something we have to deal with on our own. It's a journey we all have to go on. When I was a kid, I really resented a lot of the religion I grew up with. I felt like I was there against my will. I felt like religion often was the way that people could not think things through very carefully. But being an adult, traveling around the world, has helped me to rediscover my faith. And my faith is a personal matter, right? I am a Christian and I am a Protestant Christian. But my faith is a personal journey, and I would never want to force my faith on you. If you are an atheist, if you're a Catholic, if you're a Muslim, if you're Jewish, that's your business. Buddhist, Zoroastrian, right? Taoist, whatever. Not my business, right? But spiritualism is a journey. Everyone has the right to go on their own. As far as the cults thing, I think the cult thing is a little bit of a different question. And I think that that there are different fanatical religious groups and political groups and self-help therapy. There's different kinds of quote-unquote cults that emerge. And often what that is it's groups of people that are unsatisfied with this society, kind of, being isolated from U.S. society, and kind of functioning in isolation from U.S. society, and as a result, becoming very kind of internal and authoritarian in their isolation. And that's a phenomenon. It's a sociological phenomenon that goes on, and psychologists have studied it, and I don't honestly know enough about it. Honestly, it's a strange phenomenon. Cults and cultism, right? I interviewed a woman who'd been a member of the Unification Church. She grew up in the Unification Church, which is the Moonies, right? Which is a CIA cult. But, I don't think everything that was weird about the group she was in was created by the CIA. That on some level, human beings do form organizations that you could call cults. They just kind of do, right? Some are more consciously created than others, but it's a thing that humans do. And why do they do it? What motivates them? Good question, right? Interestingly, different time periods have different cults, right? In the 1970s, there were a lot of cults in the United States. Nowadays, there aren't as many, right? I mean, they get a lot of publicity. There aren't as many, right? But then in the 50s, there weren't very many cults. In the 50s, very few people were in cults. But then if you go back to the 1870s and all of that, there were all kinds of cults. So I think it's something related to society. And what is it? One man's cult is another man's religious group, right? One man's cult is another man's therapy organization, right? And that it's really hard to draw the line as what is a cult and what isn't. I remember when I was a kid in my church library, sometimes I would hang out in my church library because it was a place I could go, skipping Sunday school class or something. Remember they had a book at the library, and it was the 4 major cults. And it was a really old book, and I opened it, and the 4 major cults were Mormonism, Christian Science, Seventh-day Adventism, and Jehovah's Witnesses. And I thought, that's interesting, because there's way more cults than those out there, right? But I remember that, and it was the 4 major cults, and it was an old book. It was like from the 1940s or something, and the definition of cult in this book was not, what it is now, right? Cults now, people think of Jim Jones and, now, but the definition of cult in that book was form of Christianity that's not right, and you read it, and the only criticism they had of these groups was a theological critique. It was a theological critique, right? These groups were considered to be cults because they were so out of step with Catholic and Protestant Christianity, they were considered cults. And that's interesting because right, the word cult, the way we use it in American English is actually different, right? A lot of languages around the world, they have a word that more accurately translates, and if you go to Europe, people will talk about sects, sects, S-E-C-T-S, sects, right? And that often describes, like I remember when I was in Iran, and there was a guy from Russia, and I remember he said that he said I consider Protestant and Catholic to be sects of Christianity. He was Eastern Orthodox. Well, the word sect, right? It means like you practice the faith, but you have deviated so much that you have broken away from it. That's what sect means, right? It's like, and a lot of, I think in other languages, right? Like Jehovah's Witnesses, what they believe is so different than what most Protestant and Catholic Christians believe, that they're condemned as a sect. Mormons, right? They have, Joseph Smith and the Book of, they're considered a sect, right? And the word sect, right, which is in American English, we've always said cult, has a different meaning, right? And in the 70s, we started talking about political, religious, and other groups that form that are kind of authoritarian and in opposition to society as cults. But until then, cult just kind of meant religious deviation, right? And the word sect, it kind of describes what we meant by cults in the United States until the 70s. When we say cult in the United States, we're talking about kind of a sociological phenomenon. But until, in the 1940s and around the world, sects is a more accurate translation of the word cult. So, all right. Anyway, that was a long-winded answer to that question. All right, moral relativism versus universalism. Well, I'm not a complete moral relativist, but I do understand that in different circumstances, people make different decisions, and that's a whole big, long philosophical conversation I'm not going to get into now, because I've been on here a long time, and it's getting late, folks. All right, and non-political philosophers. I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I'll just say this. When I was in high school, I read Thus Spake Zarathustra. And honestly, I look back on it now and I don't agree with a lot of what's in that book, but it certainly made my day. Put a smile on my face. Made me feel pumped up, and it connected with me on an emotional level. But I'm not a Nietzscheist, and Nietzsche, I'm not a fan of him at all. But there was an emotional connection to it. He was speaking to guys like me in high school. So there you go. Alrighty. The next question here, I am not in favor of anyone being deceived or lied to. I think that we need accuracy in all things. People need to receive accurate information. So that question was very provocative. Whatever. And when is Jimmy Dore going to have me on? I don't know. Well, anytime, Jimmy. I'd love to come on your show. Huge fan of you. Anytime you'll have me on, I'll come on. I'm here. Just send me a Twitter message. Send me an email. First name, last name @gmail.com. It's very easy to reach me. So, yeah. They've been saying they want to have me on. I'm down. Anytime. Still a big fan. Awesome. All right, folks. I think this is where we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Folks, thanks for everything. It's been fun. I'll be back soon. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night. And don't forget, we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Good night, everybody.